Good afternoon. Welcome to the Upper Room Worship Service. We just want to welcome the visitors and also our regular attendees to worship with us this afternoon. We've got an exciting program for you. We have a guest who has recently come to Australia. His name is Jonathas Newlands, and he pastors at the Springvale Spanish Church as well as the Frankston Church. So we look forward to him sharing a little bit about a title, a topic called Relational Worth. So we will look forward to that a little later on. At this moment, I'd like to just draw your attention to the giving app that we have on our phones and on the internet. If you are comfortable in contributing to our local church budget, I invite you to get on the app or the internet, our church website, and just put an amount there as a love offering and a form of worship. So your tithes would also be appreciated. In a moment, we're going to have some music from one of our music teams, and they're going to be singing a song. It's called Blessed Assurance, and there's a phrase in there. It says, I found in you, I won't be shaken, I will not be moved. And it draws my attention to a text in the Bible, Jeremiah 17 verse 7 to 8. It said, Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, and whose hope is the Lord. For he shall be like a tree planted by the waters, which spreads out its roots by the river, and will not fear when heat comes. But its leaf will be green, and will not be anxious in the year of drought, nor will cease from yielding fruit. I hope that's your experience today, as we are not shaken, but we have deep roots found in Jesus Christ. So let's just close our eyes for a word of prayer before we begin. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for giving us this time of praise and worship. And I just want to thank you for allowing us to drink from your well in order for us to be free and also not be anxious, because we always have our faith found in you. So bless us now as we go into a time of worship and praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So please sing along as you see the words come up. You're at home. Make yourself comfortable. Shout out to the Lord. Have a great day.
God Hey everyone, welcome to the Upper Room today with myself and a new face to our church. This is Jonathas Newlands. Say hello, Jonathas.
Hello, everybody.
Jonathas is, as we've heard, a little bit of a world traveller. So
Yeah.
I believe Vic has introduced us. Now, Jonathas, you were born in Brazil.
I was born in Brazil. I wouldn't say, I don't know if I'm a world traveler, but I
You've
grew up in
lived in a few
Brazil.
places.
I did. Yeah. And then because my father happens to be a pastor and they became missionaries and we crossed the world to East Timor, Timor-Leste, in Indonesia. I was there for a while and then I went to the US and then spent the last years of my life, the last 10 years in New Zealand.
And now
Yeah,
you've come to the promised holy land, the Canaan that is
that's
Melbourne.
what they say.
And
No,
so
so
you've been studying, in the US. You've been
mhm. I went to
a
high school in
missionary.
the US,
Yep.
and I went back to Brazil for uni. Went to
Okay.
an Adventist university there, the Adventist University of São Paulo, and I had a great time. Had many friends, and I happened to I ended up in New Zealand because I was a volunteer one year. I took a gap year. The Adventist Volunteer Services. I
Yep.
think you have heard of it. Those of
I was
you
with the Adventist Volunteer Services when I
did.
took 6 months in New York.
Oh, that's a fun place to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to Invercargill, New Zealand, like at the bottom was like a tiny town.
One of the coldest places in the world.
Yeah, but no, it was great though. I mean, and I got to explore a lot there, like Queenstown and all those places you see in the movies, like Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
there, and but I wasn't expecting to be back to this side of the
Yeah.
world. But God has plans, greater plans than we can imagine, and
Yeah.
yeah,
So
it was cold and
I'm not going to tell everyone how old you are, but you've essentially lived a
ah,
considerable portion of your life, more, bordering on almost half of your life now in
right,
this part of the world.
right,
So
incredible. Yeah, almost half of my life. So
you're very much part of the
yeah,
Australasian
yeah, I'm at
region.
home. I'm at home now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So originally from Brazil, now
Mm.
Brazilians speak Portuguese.
Yes.
So you grew up speaking Portuguese. You
Yes, it's
clearly
still my
speak English. Otherwise, we're speaking in tongues here and it's working really well.
most of the times, except when I'm stressed out or tired, you'll start seeing me.
You don't know what language you're speaking then. It could be
Yeah.
anything.
And I was also
But
placed into a Spanish Hispanic
well,
church here.
this is what I want to look at. So people logically think South Americans generally all speak Spanish, except really in Brazil.
Yeah, we're the weird ones out. Decided to go another way. Yeah, there's the only ones who speak Portuguese there. So Spanish, you don't hear it at all in Brazil. But our languages are close enough that I can pick out what they're saying. So they can't speak behind my back unless they're using slang.
Yeah. Or
And
some weird dialect.
oh yeah, and trust me, there are. And so that was the new challenge for me coming here. And they said, like you probably know enough to be able to communicate with them. And I guess I do, but I have synced like the power of the Holy Spirit
Yeah.
giving me the gift of tongues because in like 4 months now, I've been able to have
Yeah.
conversations. And I've never had a Spanish course before.
But at the same time,
So
with the similarities, it's the whole idea
yeah,
of you 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 can learn a language, but it's not really until you have to use the language that it
yeah.
becomes common for you.
Like basically, one of the best ways I say for you to learn a language is just watch people and copy
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
In my life, I've had experiences where I copied not the best words I learned along the way, especially
Yeah.
when I was in high school. Once a teacher said, "What did you say again?" I repeated it, just very
Innocent as you
innocently.
were.
I was so naive, but I learned it. That's how you do it, and that's what the way I'm learning, picking up new words right now.
Yeah.
I just hanging out with the folk there at the Spanish church, and
Yeah.
yeah, I hear them calling something, and oh, okay,
It's familiar.
that's how you refer to it. So I just repeat it next time, and I'm like, yeah, got it.
Yeah.
No,
My wife probably could fill in at the Spanish church for you because she likes to watch Spanish soap operas on
does she?
Netflix. So she doesn't speak Spanish, but you know,
Ah, yeah, she would be able to pick out what they mean. Yeah,
that's it.
yeah, she would.
That's
That's
it.
great. Yeah.
Um, Today we've invited you to come and speak with us at the upper room. Obviously, we're doing things still with social distancing involved. So you're at home and I'm at home, and we're
Great to be here.
we're far enough away from each other that we don't have to touch each other and all that kind of thing. But do you just want to highlight for everyone, just before we get right into the topic of discussion today, what is the topic of discussion? Do you just want to introduce that for everyone, and then we'll give you an opportunity to share that with people as well?
Mhm. Look, it's a topic that is important to me as well, as it should. you know, I work in ministry. It's been a while since I've been working in ministry. I grew up in church, and I've learned to just be vulnerable with God, honest with God. Just I realized that He knows everything, and whenever I tried to hide, it never turned out good. And
Yeah.
I realized that I have to be pretty raw with Him, and in times when I'm not feeling great about ministry, I talk to Him about it, and also about my faith when I'm going strong, when I'm not, and what it all means. And often in that conversation, I just sense that I want it to be real. So because only when it's real that it's meaningful, and that's when I'm really happy, you know. So it's about whether it's about me searching for Him to tell me or to show me that no, it's you're on a good path, and I'm constantly asking that question, and I'm also realizing that others in the church are facing the same challenge, and it annoys me to see that some people are not um, questioning the same things. They're just going with the flow. Not annoying me that I'm not annoyed at them, but I'm upset that um, people can just fool themselves and they're not happy enough. They're not at peace.
Mm.
And I realized that Jesus wanted people to be at peace. You know, like He's trying to get His disciples, the Pharisees, out of that rut of living stuck and living meaningless experiences that was not leading them to heaven.
It's
And
interesting. You're sharing this, saying, as a pastor, there are times that you're struggling in your faith. That's a brave thing, I think, for a pastor to say and to share.
Oh, right.
There's this expectation that you're always on this spiritual high, but we can read through Psalms, and that's essentially David's journaling of his experience with God, and there's massive highs and there's very low lows. And I think we need to be real with ourselves to go, that is the spiritual experience. There will be highs, there will be lows. But the thing that I want to pick up with what you said, and I don't know whether you realized you said this, is that it's not so much that happiness or joy comes from the massive highs or the massive lows. The happiness or joy comes from being real and honest with God.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And those moments, we have those highs often in ministry. It's I think what's one of the reasons why I'm still here. Like you get hooked to it.
Yeah.
but also obviously it's because of the relationship. But ups and downs are normal. Weekly, we can have them. I think even during the quarantine, at this time of lockdown, and being away from people, it's even easier to fall into those spaces because often people pull you up.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, wait, even when I'm on my own, my having that with God,
Yeah.
is that faith, is that relationship is what actually is pulling me up, not my fellowship or not my good time in church,
Okay,
And
so we're going to be speaking, I suppose, more on that relationship with God motif today. And we can go right through the Bible. There's relationships right from Genesis through to Revelation, even throughout history, of people who have had these high and low relationships with God. But the reality is, if we kind of pick parts from this story and then this story and then this story and then this story, it gets a bit messy. So where are you drawing from for our time together today?
Okay, today we're drawing from one of the parables of Jesus. When you look at the parables he told, they were all about relationship. Usually involve two people. Even when they're sheep, there's a relationship of a pet and a master in a way.
Yeah.
But and today's, I just thought we could take a moment to reflect on the parable of the prodigal son, which is it's a famous parable, and we've probably heard lots of sermons based on it. But there's always we have the opportunity to look at it from a different angle, and this, as you said, like parables, we know parables teach, these parables specifically teaches about the love of God, about forgiveness, about the dangers of the world, and all the things we are aware. But I think if we look specifically at the two sons in the story, we will really identify ourselves with them.
Yeah.
And the struggle in relationship that we often have in our everyday experience. Yeah.
So, Jonathas, with that in mind, do you just want to then open up? We'll give you some time to share freely. I won't interrupt you, or I'll try not to. Just share kind of some learnings and some teaching from this parable. We'll give you some time to do that, and then we'll certainly have a bit more of a robust discussion based on what you've shared.
All right, great. We come to my favorite part, which is Bible study. And when you think about the prodigal son, sometimes we imagine a rebellious child living home, and who regrets it and comes back and is received. But the word prodigal does not mean rebellious. It actually means wasteful. And in the story, we have two sons, and both, they waste what is most precious to them. And it's not just the youngest one. We're talking about both. And it's not money that they waste. So let's go to Luke, check out here Luke 15, and I'll just read starting on verse 11 in Luke 15. Jesus continued, there was a man who had two sons. Again, the story is about two lost sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. And again, another important point here, even before his death, the father consents in handing over all of his estate, his possessions, to both sons. It says divided between them, right? So, well, we know the rest of the story. I won't read into what happens to the youngest son. He goes, wastes all the money, he returns home hungry, empty-handed. And then we come to verse 20. Well, the youngest son gets up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, he threw his arms around him and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandal on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast. Let's celebrate." For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son who was in the field, he came home, and when he heard the music and dancing, he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. And the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. This is great stuff. I just love this parable. This is just one of my favorite stories in the Bible. But here we have two sons who come across quite as two ungrateful children. And to me, they represent two types of worshipers, types of people that we can find in the church. And I could be one of those people, and that's why I should pay attention to the story. Let's talk about the eldest son a little bit. He says here in verse 29, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. So he sounds pretty upset. He doesn't want to go into the feast. He's not happy his brother came back. I reckon he would be one of the ones wanting to kill his brother. But he's also upset at his father. Why? Or we could say, he's upset because his father forgave his brother, so he believes it's unfair. And he's jealous. He's unforgiving. But not only that, he seems to be holding some sort of grudge against the father, because it says, all these years I've been enslaving myself. So he considers that being obedient to the father and staying in the home is like being a slave. And he reckons that the father never recognized it, and the father never blessed him enough, like the father never gave him gifts. And he's saying that he missed out having a good time with his friends, which is strange because in the beginning of the parable, we learn that the eldest son also received a share of the inheritance. The father says, everything I have is yours. So the son doesn't have to, the father's not forcing him to stay and work. And it's really unfortunate because the poor father is having his heart broken again, by another ungrateful child. Yeah. And so two sons blinded, the eldest son is blinded too. He's got such a good father, and obviously the younger one didn't see that either when he left home. And bringing that parable to our days, if the two sons represent two kinds of worshipers, and we wonder, who could the eldest son represent in our church today?
Yeah.
So to me, that's the person who probably says, well, I keep the rules, I go to church, I give up on pleasures, and it's not fair that I am faithful and there's that person in the church who is not. So people have to follow like I do, or they must be removed. I've heard that, and maybe you can think of other kind of thoughts that the eldest one would have. But they do think that they have to follow the rules. So they probably see their relationship with God in the church more like regulations, and everything is based on reward and punishment. And so It's more of a type of worship that's based on fear, relationship based on fear and not on gratitude. And yeah, like worshipers who need to negotiate with God, like if they're not good enough, they will not be blessed. So often they can come back to God. Hey, God, I've done this and this and this and this. So now bless me. Give me something. Give me my goat. I deserve it. And like in my also as what I imagine is people who are constantly in a bad mood, either because they keep on failing. I don't, they know themselves and they fail and they're not there, or simply because they are unhappy about the church, or secretly complaining, and they're frowning in church, and they expect a lot from others, especially newcomers. And if things are not going right according to the way they see must happen, they snap. And
let's just quantify.
Yeah.
Reverence and awe doesn't mean sour looks on your faces.
No way.
If you truly are in reverent action or posture towards God, and you're in awe of God because of who He is, there is jubilation and joy that comes with that.
That has been some of the experiences that I've been most grateful for, spiritual experiences in my life, have been the moments of awe that came out of blessing or out of something that God made. Like sunsets do that to me.
Yeah.
When I watch sunsets, something just makes me fall in love with God again. It's just so beautiful, warming. It's just.
I'm intrigued that you picked sunsets and not sunrises. Are you not a morning person?
No. No, exactly. I especially in the winter, I don't see. Well, especially in the summer, I don't see that many sunrises because 5 a.m. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me that.
I get to see them in the winter more often, but
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that has struck me by what you're sharing there is this older son who stayed is kind of judgmental about his younger brother who's come.
Yeah.
I've been here for years. I've enslaved myself to you. Why do you give him a reward?
But I know what one must do.
Yeah.
To please you, Father.
I mean, there's the comparison, I suppose, around the workers that are being employed by the landowner, and some are employed at like 9 a.m. and some are employed at 12 and some are employed at 3, and they all get the same pay.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge, and the reason I bring that up is because what we're seeing here is this idea that if I have done more work, I deserve a greater reward. That's a very kind of capitalistic human thought process. And the reason we struggle with this in this parable is because when it comes to salvation, it's either saved or not saved. There is no, you're not more saved than me or less saved than me. You're either saved or you're not. And this is where this older brother is really struggling. In my relationship with you, Father, surely there's greater reward for me because I stuck around, because I have slaved myself to you. But then you've got the other challenge is that if sticking around is like an enslavement, then why are you there? God is a God of freedom, not a God of slavery.
And there's always that measure of fairness, but it's our measure of fairness. I mean, I'm a person that I always, I'm really hungry for justice, like that's one of the things which actually at times in my life became a struggle, because I would want people to be punished for what they did wrong, simply because I thought that was fair.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a time in my religious experience when that's how I used to think. If you do wrong, you need to suffer the consequences. But and maturing later in life. Number one, I realized I would fail many times, and I wanted grace when I failed. But number two, I realized that the way God sees things differently. Um, he has a different context. He sees things in a different context than what I see. And then I'm able to have a little glimpse of what happened to someone and why they were there and why they did what they did, I realized to have more I should have more compassion on them. You know, for that reason, for better understanding their reasons. But in terms of fairness, we put, like, as you're saying, in a capitalist society, like, I put hours into a job, I put effort, and at least I want to expect is a bit of recognition or a little bit of appreciation. That's what we're like. It's just a human thing, and some more than others. And I think we just do the same with God. When I think it's just when we think of ourselves more than we are.
We almost put ourselves as a God.
Yeah, we might think that what I do is like deserves a godly recognition. I mean, everything I do is tainted, marred with sin.
And this is the challenge, is that if we want to talk fairness, salvation's off the table. That's fair. What God has done through the death of Jesus is something that,
it's kind of unfair what happened to Jesus.
Yeah, like taking our sins upon his shoulders and taking our place and our punishment.
One of the things I always like to say, Josh, is the unfairness of the death of Jesus revealed to the universe the unfairness of sin, or the reason why sin and evil should be destroyed. Like when it became clearly that evil is unfair. So Christ was, it's just that his sacrifice was just so on point.
Yeah. So here we've got this story of two sons, both of whom, it seems, struggled to know the heart of their father. So you've got the son who went away for a time, and when he comes back, he requests to be a servant, not knowing the heart of his father, who sees his identity always as a son. And then you've got the son who stayed, who doesn't know the heart of the father and essentially sees his identity as a slave. So you've actually got the son returning, wanting to be a slave, and the son that was there already acting as a slave in some regards. But neither of them really saw their identity as a son of their father. What challenges does that throw up for us in this day and age? You know, you shared at the beginning, we've heard this parable perhaps hundreds of times, but we are viewing it from different lenses at the moment. We have, been going through this worldwide pandemic. The way in which we view the world is different. So what can we learn from this today?
It's interesting you mentioned identity. Our identity shapes our worldview. And when you take it to, let's say, take it home, I reckon we are highly influenced by our parents or those who raised us, right? And then later in life, with people we associate with. And given that case, I do have a question. How come the son's identity wasn't shaped by the identity of the father during that time?
It's a great question. From an historical perspective, when we look at biblical narratives, you always know someone by their family line. Joshua, son of Nun. You got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You've always got this family line, family tree that you're connected to. And Jesus here is describing these sons and this father without name. And I think part of the reason for that is because it is a parable. It is generic. It is all-encompassing. It could be anyone. And perhaps part of the reason, again, this is me surmising off the top of my head, why is this son or both of these sons not identified by their father? Perhaps because Jesus has told this parable knowing even that in this day and age, in Western society, we're not defined as much by our relationship to the Father. So it's a parable not just for then, but also for now.
Yes. Well, and given that even in our experiences as humans, when we reach teenage years and our circles of influence become external, and from there on, it can even become permanently that way. People can turn out to be totally different from their parents, right?
Yeah.
In good and bad ways.
That's it.
I think in the Bible, as you're saying, even then there's examples of people, let's say even Cain and Abel. You have one that is, godly like his father, and one that's not, and Noah's life, and so on. Yeah, but one thing is for sure: we by beholding, we become who we are by beholding. So if we're spending the time with that father, the influence will come across, will come through to us.
Such a good thing to say, because I know, we were sharing just before, I spent some time in New York, and I made a very conscious effort as an Australian not to develop an American accent. And eventually, as much as I tried, the accent still came through because I was naturally becoming those who I was around. It got to the point that when I came back to Australia, now, in America, a bell pepper is what we would call a capsicum.
A capsicum, yeah.
When I came back to Australia, I went to the supermarket. I could not figure out the word capsicum because I'd become so much like those I'd been spending time with.
Yeah.
And that's just a simple example, but there are other traits rather than the accent or the words that we use, as much as those are part of it. But it's also the character that we develop through spending time with people. My wife and I regularly find, without even planning it, she could come home from work and be wearing clothing that exactly matches the pattern and color choices of my clothing, because we've become like each other to that extent as well.
Awesome.
We kind of rub off on each other in this regard with anyone that we spend a lot of time with. So we need to choose who we're spending time with. Who are we developing relationships with?
Yeah, well, they say, in books that cover the area of success. You want to be successful, hang around successful people. You want to be rich, have rich friends. It is even a biblical teaching. Solomon speaks of it. Check who your associations are. Like our friends' influence is much more than we realize. And it's why church can play such a big and important role.
Yeah,
because it provides us with with a place where we find people with awesome values, and we rub shoulders with them. Or
do we find those awesome values? Because you've shared the example of people who perhaps are a bit demure, or we've shared people who are almost bitter and sad in church.
Okay, so if we're honest and realistic about it, you can find both realities within the church. And you can actually go, well, I've known people who have become more sour or worse when they join church.
And so the question is, are they spending time with church members who know Jesus? Do they themselves know Jesus? Because if they are spending time with Jesus, and I don't want to say this in a judgmental tone, as it could quite easily come across that way, but if we as church members, as church leaders, aren't developing a character like Jesus, are we actually in relationship with Jesus?
Mm. Or are we carrying burdens?
Mm.
That was the next one I was going to say. It seems to me that for both of those sons, their sonship, their religion was a burden.
Yeah.
You know, um, I burdens, like once I went on a hiking in New Zealand, as I say in New Zealand, they say tramping. That's how we say there. I went with a group of unfit friends, and each of us we didn't really pack. We were not hikers. We just carried too much, and we decided to go to a place near Milford Sound. It's a beautiful area, and it's mountainous. It was supposed to be a 3-hour journey. We wanted to reach a lodge and spend the night there, and we
I'm
packed
sorry.
a lot.
I'm sorry. You've said a 3-hour journey. Just as a side note, if anyone has ever seen, I think it was from the 1960s, the TV show Gilligan's Island, where they were going on a 3-hour tour that ended up in a shipwreck and they were lost for years. This is the picture I have in my mind
Okay.
of a 3-hour journey.
Well, my story sounds like that. I didn't get lost, but I felt like I was shipwrecked. Because we didn't really check the walk, and so I soon discovered that half of that time was uphill. Now, like quite steep. Like like try to go into the gym or hitting your treadmill and putting like what is it
The
called?
incline?
The incline, the highest you can. Check. That was what it felt like, and we were not prepared, and then one stage, one of the girls in the group got so overwhelmed that she just dropped. Like she dropped her back on the ground and she
Gave
started
up.
crying. And I offered to carry her backpack. That was mine. And to this day, I have not forgotten the pain. Like to this day, I can feel it as I'm talking about it. I'm just getting, it was overwhelming, and it was and now when I speak of burden, I think of that day, and to make the matters worse, it was pouring.
Yeah.
Think of a miserable day, like.
Well, it was Milford Sound, New Zealand.
Was
The likelihood is it's
freezing
going to be rainy and cold.
and cold, and all I had in my mind, get to that lodge, and
Yeah.
drop these bags, and I need a hot, a hot drink of some sort. And
The moral of the story is Jonathas is never going hiking ever again because it was such a burden.
No. I still love nature. Like one of the things about me, I love outdoors. I still love outdoors. Okay. Going on hikes for 4 days, like a lot of people do, not me. I'll go on a day trip. Still love it, but I have learned to pack light.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe hit the gym before and try to get fit. But
So,
no,
so there's this
imagine
burden. You can enjoy
burden.
you can enjoy hiking, you can enjoy the outdoors, but that
Yeah.
experience was burdensome.
Yeah, that experience was a burden, but it makes me think what it's like to live life where your religion is a burden. And again, this is the reason why I brought up this topic. Because I've known people whose religion is a burden. I have seen myself being caught up in things which I was like on the verge, and thank God, he's being like pulling me back from that, even in my ministry, So like, imagine living life in churches, with carrying that weight. And there's heaps of people living that way, including Seventh-day Adventists. And they are people who are involved in activities, who keep the Sabbath, return their tithes. They're not people who are just, they are doing what you must do. They are attending worship services. They have leadership roles, but they are not excited about it. It's a burden. And just people. I have had people who have told me they have to do it, or people who say, "Oh, We really have to have a meeting. Oh, I hate the board meetings. I hate these and I hate that. And just they start to find reasons why they shouldn't be in the leadership role. And yeah, if you're feeling that way, don't. Don't just. But sometimes that extends to the whole religion experience, and the thought of an awesome father or an awesome mission doesn't really cross their minds. And then some people reach the point where all they want to do is find something wrong in the church to criticize it.
Yeah, it's almost this we almost equate the relationship with the Father. So we're talking not in the parable, we're talking the relationship with God now. We equate that relationship with God with the religious or the church experience, rather than seeing the religious or church experience as not part of the relationship building, but it's certainly part of the task, I suppose, in helping others to know.
Which is often the narrative of atheists or of the God who we do not serve, but that's the idea.
Yeah, I'm actually reading or listening through on Audible the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis at the moment. And literally just earlier, they were talking through one of the letters around, if you must, and obviously you've got this kind of evil angel, devil, demon type person writing the letters. If you must, get the individual attending church, but so caught up in the politics or the minuscule details that they miss the purpose of the experience. And I think that we do see that in our experience in churches today, whether they're Adventist churches, whether they're Baptist churches, whether they're Catholic churches, whatever denomination it is, we see people who come along to church, and even attending church is a burden.
Yes.
Now, again, we're not going to go into the conversation of, whether church form or whatever needs to happen that way. But if church is a burden and you equate church as the relationship with God, then you're going to see the relationship as
really
a burden.
Wrong with it. Yeah. And this is why we have to constantly we have to constantly come before the presence of God in that honest conversation to review, to ask him to show us whether that's our case, that's our circumstance, that's if we're being that kind of person. Like with the youngest son, he also I think looked at his father as a father of rules only. And it's like people who also look at church just as a bunch of rules. And so they sometimes they say, oh, the church only talks about rules, but they lack love. You hear that a lot coming from people. The church has so much rules, but there's no love. And some people just say, oh, the church is too conservative for me, or something like that. And then they're not keen to stay, and they say, okay, I'm going to go out. So they go out in search of that love, which they say this church doesn't have. So they go out to try to find it. Yeah. Basically, like I want freedom, the desire for freedom and the desire of love. And so the youngest sons, they leave the church. Sometimes they go to a different church looking for that. Or sometimes they even stay in the church, but they don't have any type of connection or interest. Yeah. They're just like a shell, empty shell there. So basically, like what I came to realize in this story is both sons are the same. They're very similar. Like they may have different labels, but both want the same thing. Both want freedom, excitement, and love.
Yeah.
And then they both see their father as an authoritative figure who rules, and because they have been focusing on rules, because that's all they think about, one leaves the house is lost, and the one that stays in the house and is also lost. And so they both, as you were saying, Josh, have this misperception of who the father is. But the whole story, the father, from the beginning, the father was already proving himself. From the moment the son makes a crazy request, because you don't ask for inheritance when somebody's still alive, especially in that culture. That was unheard of.
Especially when you're the younger son.
Especially when you're the youngest. But the fact that the father concedes, it blows my mind. Like, couldn't the son see that how, through the whole story, how loving, how patient, how humble, like we were saying earlier, you and I were talking about how the father gets up and runs, lifts up his garment. A person of honor would not do that ever in his culture. So he's humble, he's generous, right?
He's also saying that my position doesn't identify, like my position doesn't exclude me from forming a relationship with my children.
It doesn't come in the way.
Nothing is beneath me.
Yeah, nothing separating us, he's trying to say, which is, again, amazing when you consider that. I always say when I'm praying sometimes, God, the fact that you are the King of the universe and you are paying attention to my prayer. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm a speck smaller than a grain of sand, and you listen. But so it's so dangerous to fail to see that, because the sons were in the safest place they could be. Yes, the home had rules, but to make it safe.
Yeah.
And that's where they had food. That's where they had their greatest freedom, where they could speak up whatever they wanted. The greatest care. And sure, like in our lives, there are certain types of burdens which are a result of sin that we suffer, sometimes not because we choose, like anger, anxiety, fear. They come out of sometimes reactions of a result of what other people do to us and so on. But when it comes to religious burden, that's a bit, even when there was the influence of others along the way, it still comes down to our choice. Because if you just accept living with a burden, if your experience with church is not a happy one, or it's boring, or if it's too painful, it's just wrong. And you and I are the only ones who can say, I need to stop this. I need it to be real.
And sometimes it's not so much let me leave the church, let me leave the household. It's let me have a conversation with the Father or God. So pray about it. But in a church situation, if there's something that's just not sitting right with you, you find it boring, whatever that is, you need to have that freedom within that context to speak with some of the leaders about it.
Yeah,
to go, you know what? I'm finding this boring. This isn't really hitting the mark. And you might find that there's a bigger picture at play. You might find that they're willing to take that feedback on board, but they just don't know what to do themselves. So I think we need to.
And if you speak to if you speak to a godly leader, they will totally get you, and they will lovely take you under their wings to they walk along you to discover that.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen. That's happened. As I say, I keep on going back to this. It's happened to me.
Yeah.
And Josh, these days a lot of people speak against religion because they think, that's wrong. My religion is wrong. It's a burden, so I have to cut it out completely. But in the Bible says, God says He has a religion, and you know what? It's a beautiful religion. It is a religion that is loving, because he says, true religion, it says there in James, is feeding or helping the orphans and the widows.
Yeah.
The true religion of God is caring. The true religion of God is meaningful. The true religion of God is relationships. And a relationship with Jesus is never to be a burden, because he has revealed to us who he is.
Yeah.
When we look at him, like the father in the story, when you actually start to pay attention what kind of father this is, you're like, wow, it's a pretty likable person.
That's it.
What was I thinking? Like, this God? Yeah, no, I wanna spend time with this God. I love this God, and that's why Jesus says, I will take your burdens. I'll make your life easier. Even if in this life you have responsibilities on your back that weigh a ton, with Jesus, when you're truly in a relationship with him, you float when you walk.
Yeah. And the burden motif that you're using, we've got the Bible text, cast all your cares, cast all your burdens on me, because God cares for you.
Yeah.
You've got the visual of, take my yoke upon you. My yoke is easy, my burden is light.
Yeah.
Jesus saying that I will be the big oxen, for lack of a better term, driving us forward, and you can be my little inexperienced oxen, but I will carry the burden. You just come along for the journey.
And when he's saying
in that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, especially because he says, because I care for you. So it's the things that are for us, a burden, even if they're against God, even if they break the heart of the Father, he's willing to take it because he cares for us. He's willing to take your honest opinion of him. And then he promises to relieve us of it, alleviate our pain.
He took the greatest burden.
Yeah, the greatest burden. And then it's going to be exciting. And you know what? It's just so beautiful when you experience it, and then suddenly it's like scales fell off your eyes, and then everything is just, oh great, what can I do? And it's just, you get to church and you're just smiling, and you just, when you're hearing a prayer, it just goes in there. In a sermon, it doesn't matter who's preaching, you're like, interesting thought. Oh yeah, I'm here to take something out of it, and it just becomes so intentional.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself talking about it, and yeah.
I think you made a really good point there too. There's an intentionality to not just say church attendance, but an intentionality to developing your relationship with the Father. Relationships don't just happen by chance.
No.
I say that, but I recognize that, we have a relationship with our parents because we were born to them. So does that happen by chance? Well, no, because your parents then have made an intentional effort to get to know you, to develop you, to connect with you, and then you reciprocate and develop a relationship with them. And we've all been through those awkward teenage years, perhaps, where the relationship's a little bit on the testy side from time to time. Trust me, it gets better. There becomes a better relationship after that testiness.
It does. That's right. Especially when you become an adult and you have to pay bills, you'll really appreciate what your parents have done for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Jonathas, do you have anything else to add on this parable?
Look, just speaking of that word you said, reciprocate. What's the word? Say that in English. It's a hard one for me to say.
Reciprocate?
Reciprocate? Oh, it's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, but that word, it's because usually it needs to be out of love. Not out of in some cultures it has to be out of on just the honor of not putting your family to shame, and just because you have to. No, when it's out of love, then it becomes to you a fantastic experience. Now, Dwight Nelson, he wrote in one of his books, Unlimited Grace, he said that God is not somebody to be feared, he is somebody to be friends with. He's someone to be friends with. And, Jesus said in John 15, just as the Father has loved me, so I have also loved you. And then he said, no one has greater love than giving his own life for his friends. So I love to hear Jesus saying those words, that he considers himself our friend. So again, he's trying to help us to see him in a different way. The Father who is loving and running with open arms to receive both sons who are ungrateful,
Yeah.
So and who is our friend and who gives his life for us. So I think what I think is so important, let us not waste this which is the most precious, our best friend.
Yeah.
Knowledge of this relationship with our Father. And yeah, so maybe today we can pray, Lord, please make my religious experience a true joy, and help me to get excited, because I already have everything I need in you. So yeah, maybe that's a
good spot to land the plane, so to speak. I just want to share, you're saying, this joy is this experience of exuberance and whatnot. For those who have been watching along today, hopefully you haven't just heard those words, but you've seen that joy as Jonathas has spoken. I don't know whether you were aware of this, but I've been innately aware that right through this whole time together, you have had this joyous expression, smile on your face as you've spoken about the love and relationship that you have with Jesus. And so there are words that we could speak and we could just preach and teach, and it could be, boring for lack of a better term. But when you've experienced that joy and that love yourself, it just permeates every fiber of your being.
so
and that's
true.
been evident today with how you've
Well,
shared.
yeah, just praise the Lord. I have all reasons to love him. Just if you guys just knew me, like, I've been through a lot. I've had a sheltered life, but I've also had a lot of heartbreak in my life.
Yeah.
And I've come to know God in a really special way. And yeah, I just can't live without him. And he puts this smile on my face, mate. Like, yeah, like, I know from what I've been through that he will be with me, no matter what happens, as long as I maintain this alive, this relationship going, I'll be good.
We're all good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's our encouragement for everyone as well.
That is
let's
it. Yeah.
all of us maintain that relationship with God, because
that's what we can do.
It's something for everyone who's a son or a daughter in this household of God. It's not about the house. It's about the Father. It's about who owns the house, who owns the kingdom, and ultimately who owns our life. And my prayer for each and every one of us is that will be God as the author and the finisher of our faith.
Amen.
So with that, let's just bow our heads and have a word of prayer together as we wrap up our time. Father, I'm grateful for you as God, for you as Father, for you as friend, Redeemer, for someone who wants this relationship with me. And I recognize that even in my own personal experience, I've been perhaps more so the son that stayed at home, but there's probably been elements of the son that went away for a time as well. Even though I've never stopped going to church, the attitudes and the characteristics of that son have been evident at times in my life. And I just pray that as I continue on, and my prayer for everyone who's been watching along today is that we recognize when we're falling into being one of these sons that has the wrong heart and the wrong attitude, but instead we recognize that it's not about being a slave or carrying a burden. It's about a relationship with you as our Father. And I pray that as we go throughout the rest of our spiritual journey, we see this as a beginning point. You know, this parable ends with this son coming home. We don't know what happens afterwards, but perhaps that part of the story is for us to write in our own relationship with you. And so I pray that you be with us throughout the rest of this day. Give us your blessing, we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jonathas.
God
Much
bless.
appreciated.